Okay. And we are live. So this is 2022, 14th of December, Delivery System Sync and Demo. Welcome everybody. We are having almost full house today. We're only missing Ruben that couldn't attend. We have some topics in the discussion agenda. Thank you, Scarbeck, for adding them. Yeah, do you want to start with one of those?
Yeah, let's start with issue 2468. I'm not going to share my screen because I think we could just chat about it. I don't think there's any reason to kind of share, but so I had this idea. This was an idea I had earlier this year. This issue goes all the way back to July. And I think the primary thing that I want to maybe discuss is like maybe potential competing arguments. So the overall gist here is that we want to create my idea consists of trying to figure out a way to enable our development teams to have a mechanism to deploy dangerous code into production. That sounds dangerous on the surface, but my goal here is to try to figure out a way in which changes that are normally risky, that cannot be shoved behind a feature flag or any sort of other protective measure, we still have the ability to deploy that in a way that is safe. So currently, an example of this is the upcoming Ruby 3 upgrade. You can't feature flag this style of upgrade because you're talking about bringing in certain versions of our components being built into the image from the start. And because of that, there's no way to feature flag installing two differing versions of Ruby. The same would apply to gem upgrades, Rails upgrades, etc. So with that as the kind of the source as to what I'm aiming for, the idea is to reduce the risk associated with pushing this change out, and maybe providing the bonus capability of being able to measure the impact of this change. I could imagine this style of idea being expanded to include performance related activities. You know, if there's some sort of excellent performance improvement that can't for whatever reason be feature flagged, we could deploy this style of code change into a dedicated experimental place inside of our infrastructure that still receives a certain amount of traffic. And then from there, we should encourage ourselves to try to get all the necessary metrics in place and all the logging in place such that the engineers who are working on said code have the ability to bolster their own confidence and provide measurements if necessary, to encourage or provide just another means of data points when other engineers are reviewing their code changes. That's the idea overall. But there's a few things that we need to think about when it comes to implementing this. And the first thing I'm kind of curious about, and not a question that needs to be answered right now, because this is one of those things that kind of requires a lot of thinking time, but I would love to hear competing arguments to this particular idea. I just thought it was a neat idea. I don't know if it's something that is worth the effort. I would love to try to maybe talk with some engineers that run into stuff like this often, because I know the Ruby 3 upgrade is going to be a common thing that we need to do on a semi-regular basis. So I'm curious as to how beneficial this would be overall.
Sorry, I have a question. How what you just described is different with two canary deployments and
Okay.
I mean,
so here is the problem that I'm trying to aim for from the delivery aspect. Would we have changes that we consider dangerous or very risky? We deploy these in isolation. So we effectively pause auto deploy and we pull in just this one particular change that the engineers want in place. So when it comes down to the Ruby 3 upgrade, our current plan of action is to pause auto deploy, merge in the Ruby 3 specific changes into either the latest, or maybe we'll create a new auto deploy branch. I'm not sure, but that implementation detail is unnecessary. tag that branch. So effectively, the only difference between the prior tag that was deployed and this new tag are there would be 3 changes. And then we'll walk that through the auto deployment system like we would with any other change today. So it would go through to Canary. We could test it on Canary, QA runs, testing, etc. That gets validated, and then it gets pushed to our main stage. The problem with this is that this entire process is an all-day task between stopping auto deploy and bringing in that change, testing, QA, building itself takes upwards of 2 hours. QA could take upwards of an hour, and then the deployment mechanisms themselves take a full few hours to reach through all of our environments. If there were a problem that gets surfaced, rolling back takes the same amount of time. You got to revert the change and then go through all the entire process over again. So this is an all-day thing. I'm trying to figure out a way where we could bolster the confidence of this prior to merge, if possible. So eliminate Canary effectively, but not eliminating Canary, eliminating the risk from the start is the goal here. So we know that a code change works prior to merging in some way, shape, or form is kind of my thought behind this.
So we're actually shifting left, right?
Yes. We're trying to push the risk onto developers prior to merge effectively.
Are ephemeral environments can help here? Like deploy it in ephemeral environment, separated from everything, then hook this ephemeral environment to, I don't know, some of the load balancers from Canary or staging or something, and shift certain amount of traffic to this environment and run the tests. And then if it works, then just, propagate it. If it doesn't work, then just get rid of this new cluster or environment from load balancer and start fixing again.
On a low level, that's kind of precisely how I see this working to an extent. The harder part is what happens prior to bringing online the cluster, because we still need to build the artifact that we deploy. I feel like that's going to be probably one of the challenging pieces that we need to solve for. But no, like what you're describing as an ephemeral environment or maybe a temporary cluster that runs this temporarily, that's precisely one of the ideas I'm thinking of. We just need to, glue everything together, because currently we don't have a thing such as ephemeral environments at the moment.
Yeah, I think just to give a bit of context here is this work that we did in Q3 and partially now in Q4 in automating cluster creation is actually foundational work that we needed to get to be these functionalities, right? So Skarbek and Ahmad work on that in Q3 and Q4. Right now, we are actually trying to get this functionality from Foundations team, since this kind of like is more stuff that is in the remit of their team, and we are trying to focus on building the extra value on top of this functionality, when this functionality having cluster on demand or ephemeral clusters the way you just described ready, and then we can actually move to this kind of functionalities.
And another thing that I wanted to add, well, you need to build the bits anyway, right? So it's gonna take 2 hours, as you said. It seems like you cannot avoid this because you need those bits from this custom branch. But GitLab has this review apps functionality, which might be useful. So
I'm curious about it as well. I think that's a potential like contending solution to this. I think the challenge though is we need to make sure that the code that gets built and deployed is in alignment with the rest of auto deploy. My fear is, it's common that you need to rebase. Like the GitLab codebase moves very quickly. Like within the average day, there's probably 700-ish commits that get pushed into that repository. My fear and something that we need to work through is to try to figure out a way in which we could build this one merge request. That specific piece of code needs to be in alignment with the rest of what we have just recently deployed. So we want to make sure that the code is as close as possible to what is already running. That way we minimize the amount of drift occurring between what's running on our main stage and inside of the experimental deploy. I don't want to run into a situation where their branch might be behind by a couple hundred commits. Therefore, they're missing a couple database schema migration changes. And now all of a sudden, Sidekick doesn't know what to do because the incorrect data is getting populated inside of Redis, preventing Sidekick from doing its job because this one experimental code is doing the wrong thing. We need to avoid stuff like that.
How about building ephemeral environment on at the end of every merge train? Maybe that can help here, because
That's a possibility.
How often those merge trains happen during the day?
The problem with merge train is that it's always assuming you're going to merge it into the master branch, though. Whereas we create a segregate auto deploy branch for every deploy. So master is always ahead of our auto deployments. Because what we do is we look for the latest green pipeline and we create a new branch from that SHA from that point in time. So auto deploy is technically a few hours behind of our master branch pretty much all the time because it takes so long to test. Yeah, we're probably on average at least an hour and a half behind the master branch.
Yeah. This is something, Vladimir, that will also, when you will train probably as a release manager, there's a lot of context that will come in.
Yeah, so like review apps, I enjoy the concept, but I don't think we could target what a review app does and making sure that it keeps up to date with what we are doing inside of delivery. Because review apps are specifically geared towards development against the master branch or the default branch of that project. So if we could explore that further, I would love to. So that might be something I add to this issue because that's something I've thought of, but I quickly forgot. But I think if there's some customization option in there, maybe we could leverage that in some capacity.
One question also with review apps. I mean, we can leverage that, but we still need to find a way to route traffic, right, to these review apps if we want to route some production traffic to them, right? Because right now, the way that review apps are built, actually, no, the review apps is spinned up, and then you just go there and check if your things are working, right? So we actually don't. You are actually the production traffic, but it would be a bit different to kind of like routing some real production traffic to that, right? So I guess we still need this functionality of routing traffic properly between like different clusters. But correct me if I'm wrong, if my understanding is not correct here.
Routing production traffic to some sort of canary or ephemeral environment or on review apps is pretty easy. You just mirror it. You just mirror the traffic that goes to production. One part of this traffic goes to real production and handled by real production, infrastructure, and another part is just goes to it copies and goes to the cluster that you are actually to infrastructure that you are trying to figure out how it works. So you are testing. And then if it works, then you just get rid of this and all database changes and etc. And then you just mirror the traffic. So
I think yeah, go ahead, Skarbek.
So currently the way the review apps works today is that it creates a dedicated environment that has a blank slate of projects. So there's no such thing as review apps touching production today. If we want to be able to appropriately mirror traffic and actually have review apps be usable, we would need to have those review apps connected to our production database. I think compliance is going to have a heart attack if we try to propose this. So what my goal here is, if we could hijack review apps and make that work, perfect. Let's explore that as an option. We just need to make sure we're in alignment with compliance and that we add the necessary tooling. That way the routing of the traffic could happen appropriately, whether it be mirroring traffic, which I don't think we've got a mechanism to do today, I don't know if HAProxy has that capability.
We
Or just sending a certain percentage of traffic. Like right now, Canary sees between 5 and roughly 10% of all traffic coming into production. My initial thought is that because customers have the ability to choose whether or not they want to be on Canary or not. If customers certainly don't want to be on Canary, they could set a cookie that says, never send me to Canary. I don't want to interfere with that style of customer base. And I feel like for that type of situation, we'll probably want to stuff experimental deploys inside or underneath the Canary stage as well. We just need to figure out how to appropriately do that, and still enable quality and engineers to target their deployment inside of the routing mechanism in some way, shape, or form, which I've got ideas for. It's just a matter of thinking about it further and figuring out what we need to accomplish for it. But like Michele mentioned, one of the harder parts we have today is that HAProxy is very, very static. We need to figure out a way to make it a little more dynamic.
But again, we do have this beautiful Cloudflare, and
yes, we do.
Mirroring the traffic in Cloudflare is just one click, and you can have like the whole, like a Cloudflare is on top, and then you have HAProxy here, and you have you can add a load balancer on the top, like on HAProxy, and you can dynamically add the regions to this not to HAProxy, to Cloudflare load balancer, like a global load balancer. Yeah. And then you can have like a HAProxy as a origin for this traffic, like all production traffic goes to origin, to HAProxy origin, and this Canary traffic can go to the dedicated and separated endpoint that we can that we can use this review app for.
So if we want to explore,
I just one question to clarify on my understanding, right? So, I mean, mirroring, I understand, is a great functionality, but how do we deal with the data? So if we start to mirror data, so we start to mirror requests that are hitting like the product, right? We need to have the repositories behind or anything that actually can support this kind of request.
Well, basically, yeah, that's a tricky one, because you kind of need to also mirror production data as well, or you just limit this. Or you know what, you can just limit these tests to one particular, no, that's not gonna work, or a subset of customers, and like you mirror the data for the subset of customers to this review app, and then you just seed this data during the bootstrap of ephemeral environment. But it's gonna be tricky. I agree.
I mean, mirroring, having a copy of the full production data at the scale of GitLab right now, I think it's gonna be a bit expensive.
I think that might be like the traffic that goes to this from production might be very limited to really small subset of customers that can be mirrored. I don't know.
Yeah,
just thinking aloud.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, right, this kind of session is good to start to bounce out ideas and see if we actually explore. We need to explore more path. Skarbek, I have a question actually. Before you were speaking about the cookie, that's for my understanding and learning. Can customers of our multi-tenant offering directly from GitLab.com say, I don't want to be part of Canary? Or is it something that they need to set it up in other ways?
There's a website called next.gitlab.com.
Yeah.
What it does is sets a cookie for you if unset. If unset, you're subject to HAProxy routing rules, which means roughly 5% of traffic will go to Canary, Or if you strictly navigate to one of a set of specified projects, you will always go to Canary. If you go
Okay.
to next.gitlab.com and you set it to false, you'll never go to Canary,
Okay. And
as
this
far
is
as I
like,
understand it.
so this is per user, right?
Yeah,
Because
the user does this on their browser, because this is
yeah.
a session cookie that gets set.
Okay. Now, I knew that. I was just wondering if, let's say, a big customer can say, okay, all my users shouldn't.
No, that's not a
Okay.
thing. No.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, if anyone would like to spend about an hour of their day and then spend about another 5 hours writing ideas, I would love it on this issue. I think if we could maybe try to figure out what our blockers would be and the kind of decisions that we want to make that contribute towards this idea, or if we could figure out if this is an idea that's worth pursuing, I would love it. Or alternatively, if there are competing arguments that makes this a bad idea, or if there are better ways to implement this, I would love to hear about that. Like, I would love to hear more about what we could potentially do with Cloudflare. There will be some hurdles if we try to leverage Cloudflare routing that we'll probably need to work through, but it's worth exploring, especially if it makes this process any easier for us.
I think it's a great idea from my point of view, and I don't see any potential. When it's not gonna be easy to implement, but I think it will, it will have a big impact, because even if we are deploying not only the very dangerous changing in that way, having additional gatekeeper
Yes.
close to production environment, it's a very good idea, I think.
Yeah, like we definitely want to have a system that's monitoring that deployment, capturing errors, like, well, I guess monitoring for errors, monitoring the apdex, and if something in that realm violates our SLIs, like we need something that goes and actively halts that deployment and, provides some feedback to the engineer that was monitoring the experiment as to why the experiment was disabled. So we definitely need stuff like that in place. So, this is an issue to start a conversation. I would love to hear conversation from anyone else about this. Before I move on to the next item, any more further questions?
No, but I want to invite everybody to take a read of the issue. Understand it's like a lot of information for digester, so there was a lot of brain power put there. So please, Jenny, Ahmad, Vladimir, add your thoughts and feedback or anything like that. Did you have that?
It is a long issue, and there's already quite a bit of commentary on it, so it will take some time. So set aside some time in your day if you can.
It would be great, right, to have everybody's feedback on that. Thank you. Skarbek.
Okay, so the next one is specifically related to how we manage deployments, specifically the one that we care about, which is the GitLab.com repo, which is responsible for deploying the GitLab product itself into our various environments. And one of the thoughts I was thinking about when it came to experiments is what to do with how we manage our deployments onto clusters, whether or not we should do new clusters, effectively ephemeral clusters, or whether we should leverage existing clusters. I try to write down a set of pros and cons. I think there's more I just haven't thought about, but there's a couple of challenges that are things that we need to think about. Today, we don't have the capability to spin up ephemeral environments today, ephemeral clusters. It's just not a thing that we have the ability to do at this moment in time. I would love the ability, but in the meantime, one of the other options we'd explore is just deploying into our existing clusters. But if we choose to do that, how do we want to deploy to those existing clusters? How do we discover them? How do we configure a repository to know and understand what to deploy to what, release, etc. Right now, we only have 2 releases. There's GitLab and there's GitLab Canary. And everything is hard-coded, so GitLab Canary knows it needs to go to a regional cluster. All the GitLab stuff knows it needs to go to each of our zonal clusters with a little bit of work on a regional cluster. Stuff that we want to explore is like, do we want to do a different namespace? That in itself is challenging because if we use a different namespace, all of our secrets and all of our configuration objects need to be duplicated into a segregate namespace, which is probably fine, but it's something to think about. The other one is what to do with individual releases. Like, do we maybe keep everything in the same namespace? We just use a different release, which has all the necessary configurations item in it, all the necessary configuration items ready to go. Maybe we could just muck with the way our service labels work. That way we have all the right pods into or inside of the correct endpoints that serve our traffic. I think if we were to think about this from the side of what our repository currently does and what we want to migrate towards, we have a better idea of what we could leverage here. And if we figure that part out, we could also better encourage, maybe not encourage, but think about what kind of features we want out of our reliability team in determining what we want out of our cluster creation mechanism, which today is Terraform. If we could figure out that, if we determine that we certainly want ephemeral clusters for all this, we could go tell reliability, hey, let's figure out a way to create ourselves ephemeral clusters. If we determine that that is probably just too wasteful, potentially, and it's safe to use existing clusters, that removes a lot of work from that team and instead pushes a lot of work on on us instead, which is fine. We just need to determine the better method of approaching this problem. So if anyone, again, same deal, if you've got ideas, I would love to learn more.
I think it's you and me, John, we spoke about that like yesterday during the one-on-one. That's the part that's still like a bit unclear to me. It's not unclear. It's like I don't have a clear exhaustive list of the pros and cons of the both solutions, and having understanding, okay, which kind of the two things can give us like the right amount of value, right? I know everything is a trade-off, especially like in this kind of thing. So that would be really great to understand which is probably would be the best trade-off for us, and it's still something that is still something that we need to discover. So if anyone has any ideas or done something like that in previous jobs or something like that, also having like understanding of which kind of problem is being faced, just using namespaces for different deployments or just using new cluster for different deployments, I think would be also really helpful. But I'm a bit like, I don't know where to go, because I really don't know which is the right one, the right solution that fits us. Let's put it this way. Let's put it.
Well, my personal philosophy on all these things is like, the first, infrastructure should be disposable. So we should not pet the clusters and try upgrades and breaking some cluster components like service meshes or something like that, because like all these upgrades and cluster upgrades, version upgrades, H8 proxy upgrades, or like any potential things that you are trying to upgrade in place, they are error prone usually. So that's why it's better to spin up new cluster if you want to have a new Kubernetes version, or if you have some service mesh and you want to update it. It's like a pain in everywhere. Therefore, disposable infrastructure is it's a better approach from my point of view. And the second thing is everything should be in the code basically, and the infrastructure is like, we are not talking about infrastructure as a code. We are talking now like the whole industry moving towards infrastructure as a software, not like the code. Therefore, all best practices that you are applying for developing your infrastructure, including testing and all these things, should be applicable for infrastructure itself. I truly believe in GitOps approach. I, told this many times already, and you probably already tired of me talking about this. But GitOps is where you are taking the infrastructure bits and everything that comes together with infrastructure, glue them together, and apply software development practices on top of this. So things like PR review, MR reviews, and merge requests, and tests, and etc. And also progressive rollouts. And the progressive rollouts can be also a part of GitOps approach, because there is a certain tooling in for like from there is certain cloud native tooling like Flagger or service meshes or whatever. Like you can find like a lot of things in CNCF ecosystem that helps you to do like progressive rollouts that roll out your traffic automatically depending on your on your workflow, and this is all controlled by CRDs basically. So, and CRDs are checked into the repository, and if you want to change something, you just change the code, create MR, test it, merge it, and go to production. So this is how I would take this how my infrastructure and the deployment pipeline looks in ideal world. So I don't know, it's just my thoughts.
I think we have a lot of things that are we actually missing to get that to that ideal world here, right? So especially like also for the way that we're working in iteration, this is gonna be like one step at a time before getting there. You also mentioned a lot of parts that are a bit like ending more on like on the reliability side of things here, but is there also our duty here start to say, okay, we need this kind of functionality. Then now this kind of functionality is implemented, is maybe it's going to take one of the paths you suggested, maybe not, right? It's going to be up to them, but definitely we would need some of these functionalities, especially if we want to go in the direction that we want to go right now. I think as part of the scope of this issue, understanding which kind of benefit we have in having like ephemeral clusters that are disposable, or having namespaces just like taking two different paths kind of to achieve the functionality we want. They would be good to understand which kind of trade-off we have in each one of them, right? And also understand a timeline, right? Even if we work in an iterative approach and we speak about a very long timeline and so on, we just want to bring value to our customer, that going up the chain is orchestration up to stage groups, and enable stage groups, to have maybe like different ways of rolling out, or like even giving our customers like different ways of us exposing the feature to them. So I think we need a bit of to flesh out some more details there, and I think, yeah, going back to find like the right trade-off, I think it's key here. So I think we definitely, this is a very good start of a discussion, and maybe I don't know, I think we should probably continue also in the issue that has been posed by Skarbek there and understand the right pros and cons that are going to bring the right value for us, for right value. What's the next step on this, Skarbek?
Discussion, discovering, and making a decision effectively.
Okay.
Because I'm
Perfect.
sure there's something I've missed when thinking about this problem. So I just want to make sure others are aware and have thought about it as well.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, the more eyes we can put on that, the more people can gather this feedback, and the more idea we can have of how we can improve that, or maybe blind spot that we didn't realize that we have. Anyone else has any extra thoughts on this?
I have some thoughts and questions, but I'll go over the issues on my own time and then write some comments and opinions on it. You'll probably see some later today or something. Yeah. But yeah, thanks for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you, Jenny. So if we have nothing more, I'm gonna stop